Welcome to the Office of the Leader of the Opposition press conference for October 17, 2023. Permit me to introduce my panel. From my right, there is none other than the leader of the PNCR and the opposition, Mr. Aubrey Norton, Member of Parliament, and to his right, leader of the AFC, Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan, Member of Parliament. Welcome today. Today's press statement will be read by the leader of the opposition.
PPP sleeps at the wheels while our refugee situation gets out of control. Having agreed publicly to support the government as it relates to the protection of our territorial integrity and sovereignty, it was anticipated that the government and opposition will work in a united fashion to deal with the Venezuela threat. We believe that there are several critical issues to be addressed. We remain alarmed over the continued influx into Guyana of refugees from Venezuela and the PPP government inept and treacherous response to the situation. The number of Venezuelan refugees in Guyana is estimated around 35,000, and that number is growing as we speak. In several critical ways, this situation has long reached crisis proportions for the nation. First, a threat to national security and territorial integrity. Most of these refugees now reside in our sparsely populated hinterland region. Should they become a majority in any sizable area of our territory, Guyana could face the threat of possible annexation of these areas by Venezuela, similar to the fate of Crimea, which was seized by Russia in March 2014 on the grounds that the majority of the population there is made up of ethnic Russians and Russian speakers. The influx and uncontrolled integration of refugees can also facilitate the placement of fifth columnists and operatives into key government, military, and leadership positions, both at the local and national levels, and thus achieve a soft invasion of the country with far-reaching implications towards security, independence, and nationhood. Threat to Guyanese nationality and electoral integrity. We have repeatedly expressed our deep concern over the possibility and reality of the PPP seeking to register refugees as electors. That threat also confronts our country today. In this regard, let us recap a few critical developments. In August 2021, the PPPC administration passed the Registration of Births and Deaths Amendment Bill, which became Act Number 9 of 2021. Particularly, this act introduced into our laws a deceptively harmless provision which the PPP government said was intended to simplify the requirements for obtaining a Guyana birth certificate. Section 44A, one of the new sections inserted into the law, outlines the process by which an adult who has no documentation whatsoever may acquire a Guyana birth certificate on that basis alone. 1. A declaration in a prescribed form signed by a person of high standing in the community, including a community leader or Tushao. Or 2. A declaration under the Statutory Interpretation Act by a person of high standing in the community, including a community leader or Tushao. This declaration is to be signed by a justice of the peace or a commissioner of oaths, and the declaration must state the particulars of the birth of the person. Effectively, the law provides a means for any person to be registered as a born Guyanese without the need to provide proper evidence that they were indeed born in Guyana. Furthermore, any person once armed with a Guyana birth certificate and over 14 years of age now becomes entitled to be listed in the National Register of Registrants from which the voters list is extracted. Compare this slackness to the much tighter requirements in other countries. In Trinidad and Tobago, for example, a person seeking a birth certificate is required to provide documentary proof, such as a letter from the hospital where they were born, an immunization card, names of siblings, or a record from the school they attended, all documents that a genuine applicant already has or can readily obtain. We raised the alarm then that the PPP intended to effect thousands of birth registrations, particularly in those far-flung hinterland regions, using an established network of PPPC-aligned justices of the peace, Tushaus, and notaries public. The danger is compounded by the fact that the Guyana Election Commission now conducts office-based registration without verification of residence, as the PPP has also removed the residency requirement from the Registration Act. Guyanese must be aware that the registration of births and deaths is a critical component of our election integrity and national security. The adding of persons to a register who are not legitimately entitled undermines the integrity of the population and can lead to the anomalies in the allocation of resources and voting and representation. Note that we draw a distinction between the registration of refugees for administrative purposes, which is necessary, and the registration for citizens, which we oppose. Our core principles on the rights of refugees. The opposition wishes to reiterate that despite these deep concerns, we remain committed to the comfortable settlement of these economic refugees in our homeland, as a demonstration of our typical Guyanese hospitality and our full compliance with our international humanitarian obligations to refugees. The UN Convention of Refugees, under which Guyana is obligated to accept refugees, spells out clearly that they are entitled to such rights as employment, education, healthcare, internal travel and housing, international law. However, makes a clear distinction between migrants and refugees. In particular, there's no obligation for states to grant political rights to refugees. Each nation has to assess its own particular circumstances. Our circumstances are exacerbated by the incompetence and ploys of the PPPC administration, as well as by the fact that our country's borders are extremely porous, our system of immigration and border control is lax, and government lacks the ability and interest to determine who is crossing our borders out of real economic necessity. The time has long passed for a national conversation on refugees, on their treatment and their path to Guyanese citizenship. Unless decisive action is taken, Guyanese will find that their country faces serious threats to its security and sovereignty without a gunshot fired in anger or in any military action. In the 2 years remaining in its tenure, the PPP needs to act before the situation gets worse. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I will take questions on the statement.
No, before we take questions, I just want to say that my presence here has to do with full support in relation to this press statement on the PPP sleeping at the wheel, whilst there can be national security issues accumulating, and also this very sorry threat as to electoral integrity as a result of these Venezuelans being, by that very slack process, becoming, first of all, with birth certificates, that means to prove that they're citizens, and then later on getting ID cards so that they could be on the voters list. This is not only a threat, it is the opinion of the Alliance for Change and myself as leader of it, that this constitutes an imminent danger to political stability and also electoral integrity.
Thank you.
Good day, Dennis Brown, Demerara, Wales.
Go ahead.
To both Mr. Norton and to Mr. Ramsden, sirs, can you say beyond the public statement whether the opposition will be formally writing the Guyana government, expressing concern and, of course, seeking any sort of discussion in this matter? Or you would be leaving it up to them to have you come to the table?
I would think that we have made the public statement, we give them some time to see the response, and then we could act after that.
I take that approach too, and if they do not act after a reasonable time, we certainly will take it up in Parliament, which is supposed to have the October sessions commenced in a couple of days' time, and we will take it from there. But it is an important matter of national security and electoral integrity.
Thank you.
And have you been collecting any information as far as the registration process goes to ascertain whether indeed people have been registering as Guyanese, although they may not be eligible? And what numbers are you looking at?
Well, I can't give you the details of the numbers, but I know we have had cases and we have made the objections. As I understand it, once you make the objection, they will note it, and then we will have our election commissioners raise it at the Elections Commission.
Let me also add that our representatives from Region 1, 7, 8, 9, and 3 at a very important national executive meeting that we had a couple of days ago indicated this is a reoccurrence. People who are known not to be Guyanese born, but Venezuelans, are registering. And we have asked them to accumulate the information, the names and so on, but they're not getting support. We understand that the person in Region 1 who is helping out in this thing is a representative from the Prime Minister's office doing this thing. And that is serious. And when the AFC reps are asking for the information, they're not being given any. Now, you must understand too, Dennis, that this is a separate arrangement and regime as against what we had before, this amendment to the registration of the Births and Deaths Act. In Guyana, before you can prove late registration prior to that amendment, you had to go to a magistrate in the district to make an application that this person was born in Guyana, and that magistrate has scrutinizing facilities to ensure that he or she can question those persons, like asking which hospital they were born, get an affidavit from the grandmother that indeed that person is Guyanese and was born at wheresoever, Maruka hospice or wheresoever it is. All of that is now gone. You get a well-aligned Tushao, and that Tushao can simply say, yes, I know that that fellow Finance was born 20 years ago, and he's Guyanese. And that's basically it. Now, that is dangerous. So the regime has changed, and that weakens it. And to that extent, then we feel that this thing got to be investigated thoroughly. And we might very well, again, at parliamentary level, ask questions of the relevant minister. All the persons who have been registered under this regime. And I hope we get the answers.
Thank you. Questions on the press statement?
If you permit, go ahead, Ramsey, sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I just wanted to know, I know you're concerned about the influx of these Venezuelan refugees. What is the opposition's suggestion or plan to the government in terms of, or suggestion to deal with this issue? And I also have another question, but could you answer that one first? Because this one is unrelated to what you're talking about?
Now, the opposition position is that, in the first place, the amendment to the laws, and we did oppose it when it was debated in Parliament. The amendment to the laws is out of place. You cannot, in a country that has a territorial controversy with a neighbor, amend laws creating the conditions for anybody to become registered and ultimately a citizen first. The next thing that is important is that we have a territorial controversy with Venezuela. And therefore we have to be very, very serious. At one press conference, we went as far as saying, at least I did, that you have to be careful you don't put these numbers in Essequibo. If you have large numbers of Venezuelans in Essequibo, you are almost immediately destroying your claim. This matter is before the International Court. Venezuela wants to shift it away. We have got to take every action to ensure that it isn't shifted. One, we have to monitor our borders. Two, they have to have intelligence work done. We need to know who is coming. You need to know their background. You have to check to see if the Venezuelan authorities are putting spies, military people in there. It's not a simple, easy task. You are dealing with a nation that is an adversary. You are dealing with a nation that has made claim to our territory, and therefore, in a very structured way, we have to do everything to ensure they don't get a foothold in Guyana and be able to actually take Essequibo or anywhere just because of the numbers and because we erred by registering people who should not be registered. We're saying to the government, let's take a nationalist approach to this issue. Let us be united. Let us understand the dangers involved in, say, in a community leader. Anybody could be called a community leader, a two-show. Anybody can virtually carry those designations and say, yes, I know this man, he is Guyanese, and it turned out that not even Guyanese. We have to protect ourselves, and so it has an intelligence element, it has the registration element, and at the same time, we have been saying that there's need for us to have an education program to sensitize our people to the reality of what is happening.
Let me just add to that. Aubrey is absolutely right about those issues. I would like to add this aspect of it, that the opposition and also other civil society groups can be incorporated here, because when it comes to territorial integrity, of course, we need as much broad-based support as possible. We are not seeing that, and especially in the context of a public security parliamentary committee, which is supposed to deal with these matters at a parliamentary level. That committee is also what you call an in-camera committee. So we are not supposed to take sensitive information out from it and so on. But inside of there, the opposition, being responsible members of that committee, will also ask the various questions as to whether indeed the government is doing everything necessary. One of which is to allow the opposition to ask questions of, say, the Chief of Staff. Because the Chief of Staff recently came out with a statement that we shouldn't be too worried. But should we take the Chief of Staff word for it? We saw Mr. Netanyahu in Israel there taking this Chief of Staff and all his strength in the military and all that. And look what happened. Okay? So it is important that first of all the opposition be allowed to scrutinize the Chief of Staff, and also the Chief of Staff be made to answer publicly as to a number of questions. We understand the national security issue. There could be state secrets that will have to be kept by him. But at a larger level, there must be transparency on this issue and a scrutiny that can come from the responsible opposition. We have already declared ourselves united with government on this issue. And it should allow us and be accommodating to us to permit more scrutiny as to what is happening there at Etteringbang and so many other places, and also in relation to other intelligence.
Thank you.
I think this next question is to Mr. Norton. This is in relation to the relinquishment provision. has the opposition made a decision on its next step for Mr. Jadio to provide the evidence to justify the relinquishment?
In the last press conference,
Because last week he said that his legal team is dealing with it. So just wanted to know what's your next
in
step.
the last press conference, we said it's a matter we're looking at and we will address it at the appropriate time. And our people are still looking. Remember, there are a number of people that are engaging in this issue.
All right, thank you.
Mainly, like a legal team, can you say number of people?
It is a multidisciplinary team.
All right, just bear in mind, we're still taking questions on the press statement.
I have
One moment. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Shabral, and then I'll take Mr.
Thank
Benchcom.
you. Following up, Mr. Ramchitan, do you believe that the Guyana government should ask the refugees many of the refugees, or migrants rather, to leave Guyana and to take measures to avoid further arrivals?
It is always a complex issue, Dennis. It is not as easy as we might very well think that you can solve. The trouble is that we have to have intelligence as to who are coming in. If they are, as Aubrey mentioned, spies and militiamen that are coming in to size up our military side of things here, certainly I wouldn't want them, and I'm certain you wouldn't want them. So it has to be very much with the intelligence necessary, and as a result, once they're economic refugees and people who have been politically persecuted, that we have an obligation under international conventions to make sure that we help out, and we will help those. But we don't want, as I said, and as is titled in this press conference, sleeping at the wheels by the government. And that's what our fright and fear is.
And Dennis, you need to note that we were specific to say refugees. I notice you're shifting in the direction of migrants. One has to be very, very careful. In the case of refugees, when the situation changes, they are expected to return home.
That's right.
If you treat them as migrants, you're creating a pathway for them to become citizens, etc., which is not in our best interest. And we believe at this stage they should be treated as economic refugees rather than migrants, in which you will have certain obligation, you have a very small population, and honoring migrants conditionalities can generate security problems for us. So conceptually, we have to treat them as refugees and not solely as migrants. And even if it's migrants, it most likely will be economic migrants rather than just migrants in the wide sense, in which you just put mechanisms in place and create a pathway for them to become Guyanese or citizens. We have got to be very, very careful with that. We must recognize that we have a population of 750,000. In elections in Guyana, at present, you can have a situation. Well, let me give you the reality. In the last 3-4 elections, no political party got more than 10,000 above the other, or 15. Let's put it even at 20. Imagine if you allow 20,000 Venezuelans to have a path to citizenship in Guyana, and then they form a political party, and then they win the balance of power. You are virtually creating vulnerabilities which we do not need to create. I'm very clear, we need to help refugees, but we need to take every measure to exclude them from the political system as it exists. There are many dangers, and all of this must be taken against the background that we have a territorial controversy that is before the International Court. We believe that the court will rule in our favor because The land belongs to us. It was settled by the 1899 Arbitral Award. And this can be very well Venezuela recognizing that that is going to happen, coming with another strategy to achieve their objectives. We need to be careful.
Thank you. Mr. Mark Benchcott.
Hi, good afternoon. Good to see the opposition leader along with the leader of the AFC together at the press conference. I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Ramjatan, who is a trained lawyer, concerning the police force being renamed, not the police force, but the policia. And what Mr. Norton correctly alluded to earlier, there's a territorial dispute. What legal measures that can be taken to ensure that the policia is removed from all police vehicles across Guyana? That's one. And the other, concerning the Chief of Staff, traveling around with Mr. Ali in other countries, dealing with political matters and with all the controversies and rumors of Venezuelan soldiers and so forth at our borders in Guyana, not a word from a work economic relationship with Venezuela. Thank you for now, sir.
Well, yeah, those are three questions about very important issues presently, very topical. Look, that policia thing is utter nonsense. It's abhorrent. And it is my opinion that the police ought to immediately repaint all the vehicles that have policia with police. It was, I understand, an executive decision of some sort, and it was obviously ill-advised. It could be easily remedied because Guyana is English-speaking, and every inch of our territory, every blade of grass should have Guyana in English, as it were. And in every institution, hospital, regional office, you have English as the words used. And so I would like that to be made clear, that it is an abhorrent thing. It is very anti-national. And I don't know who actual idea it was, but I understand it was an executive decision. Guyanese should also write more in the newspaper, and even within the various regions where these vehicles have this label, they should tell them that remove it and put Guyana Police Force. In relation to the Chief of Staff going with the President, look, there is an element of working relationship that every Chief of Staff must have, especially if the President is going probably to deal with issues of the border dispute, or to outlay to them what are the issues surrounding that and what is happening at the borders and so on. If for that reason it is that the President had carried him, of course you need from the very important official, which is the Chief of Staff. And Mr. Omar would be necessary as a staff on that party that is going there. However, I believe that like every other senior official in our security apparatus, they must allow themselves to also answer questions concerning these trips. That is the transparency and the accountability that is required. I'm certain that could be easily done, and the matters could be parsed off as to which is official secrets as against which is not. But at least the effort is made to keep the country, and especially the opposition, who has an interest, especially also the general press, with the actual what's happening on those tours that he had gone to. In relation to the regime's approach, it is for that reason that I decided to come here with Aubrey, because we feel that the PPP's approach on this national security, like for a long, long time, they really do not understand national security issues. I don't think they have a very good command of it. And that is why we believe that they are sleeping on the wheels. And I want to support the APNU here and to state that indeed our approach is vastly different. Our approach, as you know, would have incorporated the opposition. Mr. David Granger had such an incorporation when we served our term in 2015 to 2020. And we allowed the Public Security Committee that was established by me in Parliament to ask any questions on these matters. For all you know, very few questions came, but at least there was an accessibility to getting information as to what is transpiring. And there was a PPP president previously who also allowed people like Raphael Trotman and Ralph Ramkoran and so on. They were members in this border dispute committee. And they also managed to get from the government of then what is happening. I think it was under Janet or some other person.
If you're true, I think we need to also get from the government and the police, how did they arrive at this police here? Because you see, what happens if it is orchestrated by the Venezuelans to test what we are prepared to accept? And so it should not just be a question of us saying remove it. We need to, from an intelligence and security standpoint, understand the origin of the decision and to be able to understand if it is just act based on ignorance or it was orchestrated by the Venezuelans through some agency to test what the Guyanese will tolerate because I don't see anybody with a modicum of common sense agreeing that you have a territorial controversy with Venezuela and agreeing to put on your vehicle Policia in Spanish. It makes no sense, so one needs to know the source of it.
Thank you. Mr. Antonio Day?
Good afternoon, members of the press, and good afternoon, Mr. Martin and Mr. Rambutan. I have a question in relation to the territorial dispute. Mr. Rambutan just made reference that it appears as if there are some Venezuelan soldiers on that borders. Going back to history, which revealed that we had an issue with the sindicatos in reference to the Amerindian village scenario, where many of the villagers were threatened in terms of mining concessions and utilizing the land. Do you think, Mr. Naja and Mr. Rambutan, that the Guyana Defense Force is equipped enough to challenge the Venezuelan soldiers, considering the fact that they may have more arsenals than we do?
My answer to that is this. We have historically built an architecture and infrastructure on foreign policy to protect our territorial integrity. That apart, we have to mobilize external support. I think every child knows that we lack the military capability to take on Venezuela. So to me, it's a kind of a non-question. What we need to do is really continue to advocate for the peaceful solution of all problems in this world. We have historically opposed any form of aggression and use of military force. We need to do that. But at the same time, we need to do work to have intelligence report and to understand what is happening to further strengthen our diplomatic and other initiatives to ensure that we protect our territorial integrity and sovereignty. That's as I see it. But I think to move in the direction of talking about military capability is not very useful for us in this kind of a situation.
I want to add to, yeah, indeed, we are going to be perennially at a disadvantage when it comes to a powerful country, militarily, like Venezuela. But within our borders, Isenru and the Etteringbang area and all those areas, I had described it as sometimes ungovernable spaces because We do not have so much resources. But one resource we had, and that is a very competent Guyana Defense Force that used to be in that area and give, at least at the cabinet, a lot of information as to what are the goings on there, so that we can tell our partners like the United States of America and USA, UK, and even Canada, and our regional partners. I am well aware of that happening. Information being gathered by the GDF. The GDF has a competence to do that. And that is what, we don't want GDF to go fighting with Venezuelans. That is going to be deadly and detrimental to us. The trouble is, keep a tab. This government seems not to be getting that tab on what's going on there, and to that extent I feel there is a difference in approach. They're sleeping at the wheels, and you had, of course, a Granger administration that was wide awake.
Mr. Ramjitan and Mr. Norton, I guess you might have misinterpreted my question. I was not referring to fighting. I was saying that considering the fact that Venezuela, knowing how they are when they do not get their own way, they might do a surprise attack. So I'm asking in that regard if you think that in light of the training that many officers we see now are going to different countries to conduct training, if you think that we are prepared in case that the ICJ rules in our favor and Venezuela is dissatisfied and we are at a point where we have to fight a war, if you think that we are capable at this certain moment.
It's the same question you bring back differently, and we have answered it. There's no need for us to be even, we have to consider having some military capabilities. But we live in the real world. We are not a match for Venezuela. Therefore, a lot of what we do has to be intelligence-driven, foreign policy, diplomacy-driven. We have to mobilize support and deter Venezuela rather than the approach that is suggested. Now, the outcome, we believe, will be that we are entitled to the land. The arbitral award of 1899, give it to us. If we anticipate that Venezuela will not agree, then as a country, we have to preempt and come up with strategies to deal with that eventuality. And I'm not so sure that that eventuality will result in military confrontation. You started by making the statement that when Venezuela doesn't get its way, it goes in the direction of military action. I don't know where the evidence from that came. What the evidence suggests is that Venezuela continues to make the claim, but so far there hasn't been an indication that they are intended on taking this by military means, and we have got to do the things in the world to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Thank you. All right, I see the hand of Mr. Dennis Shabra.
Yes, a question to Mr. Norton, please. Less than an hour ago, the president of ExxonMobil, Guyana, Mr. Routledge, told the media that he did inform you, your colleagues at the meeting, that there was an agreement reached, but he said it was not a formal agreement. And he says the ball now is back really in the hands of the Guyana Revenue Authority. What is your reaction to what Mr. Routledge said today? And secondly, it is not normal for us to see both yourself and the AFC leader sitting at one table, at least not in recent times. To both of you, I'd like a response from both of you. What are the prospects as of now for a reunification as the joint coalition to contest the 2025 general and regional elections?
All right, let me start. I didn't hear, I was in a meeting all the time. I did not hear what the head of ExxonMobil said. What I do know is that we give a factual account of what occurred, and we anticipate that he will agree that he did say that to us. Now, I didn't hear the statement, and I don't want to go past that because I need to read the language of what he would have said. Language conveys different things to different people. As it relates to reuniting, I don't know about reuniting. As far as I know, the AFC and the APNU continue to work together. As far as I know, we believe that there are advantages in coalition. As far as I know, it's a wide open door, and we can do whatever is needed to ensure we defeat the PPP. And whatever is needed, we will do to defeat the PPP, because defeating the PPP is what is needed if Guyana is to return to some semblance of good governance. So for me, while the AFC had agreed to do its political work by itself and we by ourselves, I did not see it in the context that you raised it.
That is correct, and that is putting it in proper perspective. Dennis, you would have seen myself and Aubrey sitting all the time together in Parliament. I don't know why you're saying that we haven't been seen. For the last 3 years in Parliament, the few occasions that we have had Parliament, I am sitting next to Aubrey in that Parliament, as you'd appreciate. Elections 2025, well, fine. We know certain things have to be done at our party level. National conference will have to be held. But I believe, like Aubrey, on matters like this one that we're talking about, national security and electoral integrity, certainly, if it comes to it, we are willing to sit together and deal with those issues because they concern a larger section. When it comes to the political campaign, of course, we at that moment in time will consult with our membership and we will deal with that issue as it comes forward. But at the moment, in Parliament especially, and other places like this, we certainly will be together because we feel together is stronger.
Thank you. I see the hand of Mr. Mark Benchcott.
Thank you. I've been waiting patiently again for my questions. Mr. Ramjertan, getting back to, and like Dennis Chabral, I do think, and add a third again, to see both you and the leader of the opposition sitting together and holding one voice, having one voice, which is a distinct difference than seeing you both sitting next to each other in Parliament. But nevertheless, it's good to see y'all. To the question, back to the disrespect by Barra Jagdeo when he said that he was willing to share the economic zone with Venezuela and Guyana not so long ago. How dangerous was that statement then and how dangerous it is now? And do you believe, both you gentlemen, believe that the Venezuelans looking into the situation in Guyana, massive corruption on a daily basis, internal differences and strife within the PPP, that they oftentimes see this as a suitable moment to make their charges of claims to the Essequibo? How much those events, corruption and so forth, happening in Guyana would have to do with what Venezuelan is doing again with this disrespect to Guyana? The second thing, getting back to the first question I asked Mr. Ramjertan, concerning a legal challenge to Policia. You're the trained lawyer. People are hearing what you guys want and what is it and what legal measures can be taken. Keeping in mind that you said it was an executive order. Even though it's an executive order, if it infringes with the Constitution, then it becomes an illegality. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, let me go first on this one. First of all, we do not see we do see, as a matter of fact, what Barra Jagdeo had done in relation to working relationship and all that, as a dangerous development in this context of what international law speaks about as acquiescence. The minute you start talking language like that, you are in a way being contradictory to what you will be arguing in the ICJ. And that is what Jagdeo and all of them in the PPP, even Anil Nandalal as Attorney General, just don't understand. The team that we selected to go there understands all of that very clearly. The minute you got a president or even a vice president who's by a bypass being the president of the country, that kind of thing is acquiescence. And I have spoken to Jack Dale about these matters too. Shut up. Don't talk too much about how you're going to have a working relationship and you might even give away a piece of the territory and all of that. That could be used by the Venezuelans if they now come on to defend the matter and all of that. So we got to be very careful as to what we plead and what we utter in extrajudicial side of things. As to the government being, what was the other question? Government
Being corrupt and
so on. Yes, that too makes Guyana, in the entirety of institutions and its people, that too makes it a hobbled nation that is vulnerable to an attack. If anybody understands how the military that wants to go to war and intervene and show aggression and so on, these are the opportune moments. What we got to do is to ensure that we are united both as opposition and government on this issue. And we are showing that. But if Venezuela see cracks in the sense that we in the opposition are demanding more transparency and also talking about corruption, they can use it and say, well, this is a moment where Guyana is hobbled to the extent, weakened to the extent that they could make their approaches, and it could start having what is called disunity within Guyanese community. Because I have heard today, only today before coming in, if the Venezuela want to come and take over the place, it's blast them right, go and take them over. You understand? And because this government worse than anything that we expect. Now that is an atrocity, apart from being an absurdity. So we have to be very cautious as to what we say. And this government loves to talk, and especially Jack Dale, who the Venezuelans would see as a very influential person. They will want to utilize all of those to use it as a hobbled nation, weakened to the extent whereby they could want to come in. I think those are the points.
I agree with Kemraj, but I also need to point out that international politics does have a bearing on domestic and vice versa. In this case, I think Venezuela is seeking to shift attention away from two things. One, its internal domestic situation, and two, the International Court of Justice engagement in this matter. As opposition, when the president called me, I was very, very straightforward and careful to say, on this matter, we'll be united. And I think that would have sent the signal, even though we disagree with the government and their approach to governance, we are united on this fact that this is Guyana's territory, all 83,000 square miles, that Essequibo belongs to us. So I think the mere fact that we would have said that would suggest that we are prepared to deal with this issue as an external threat to us, while at the same time dealing with our domestic situation. But I also believe the government needs to return to professionalizing this issue. Too much partisan political involvement will affect us dealing with the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. And that is why in the initial thing, I was of the view that having said that to the government, the committees would have started to function and we would be able to address these issues as a collective and therefore establish the Venezuela in clear terms that we are on one page, and while we challenge internally for political power, etc., they must not feel that our internal politics offers them the opportunity to get involved in any fashion.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I may just follow up with regards to what Mr. Norton said about this phone call that we got from the finale concerning being on one page with the Venezuelan issue. With all due respect, many people might have seen that or interpreted it as being just a sweet talking phone call to you, Mr. Norton. Has there been a follow-up phone call to meet and sit down and seriously discuss the issue and all parties being on the same page?
Mark, I have already said that it hasn't been. In fact, I opened this presentation by saying that we anticipated that it didn't happen. I don't know about the concept of sweet talk. These are issues we have to deal with seriously, Mark. Venezuela is threatening us. It is incumbent on the president to speak to the leader of the opposition, and it is incumbent on the leader of the opposition to respond. In responding, we set out our position, and we anticipated that on this issue, we will work together and move forward as Guyanese. We are cognizant of the behavior of the government. We disagree with the behavior of the government, but when it comes to the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy, we have to be united. We have to engage the government. It is our hope that the government will understand this position and come to the table at least to deal with the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy in a way that allows us to be unified and strong.
Thank you. I'll take the question from Mr. Adam Harris at this time.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry I got in late, but I heard a lot of what you said. My question has to do with the Vice President talking about ceding territory and about giving Venezuela certain concessions when it comes to the border. Now, if a government adopts a position and someone in the government adopts a position that seems to be opposite, can that be considered treason? And this is Mr. Ramjatan who wants the law.
Well, look, there is freedom of expression under a constitution, and you are free to talk a lot of stupid things when it gets to that. I rather suspect Jagdeo was at his best in his remarks in that category, stupidity, when he was making those statements. And we'll forgive him for it, because of recent times we notice he's getting more and more delusional and talking so much crap. But for a very long time now he has indicated that. I don't think it is treasonous. There is an intent to overthrow the government or overthrow the state of Guyana. That doesn't necessarily follow if he says what he said. But I think it was a stupid remark, because again it comes back, knowing that we have a case in the ICJ, him making that could fracture our consistency of policy, that land is since 1899 ours, and acquiescence, as I mentioned, could be a principle that is affected as a result.
Could I add, we have to see it, we have to see Jagdeo's position as undermining our case nationally. What he does is undermine our case. We have built a case, the 1899 arbitral award, the 1931 tri-junction point, we went to the Geneva Agreement. There is a whole process that we were involved in that build a case and take us this far. It is unfortunate that Jagdeo is what he is, or isn't. But one of the things we must note, when you become involved in corruption and making money, you become a transactionalist. Yeah. What is unfortunate is that Jagdeo doesn't seem to understand that if you take that transactionalism and take it to the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy, it undermines us, and he should desist from doing it. I think he is overwhelmed by its obsession with making transactions and didn't factor in that transactionalism will not serve us in good stead as it relates to the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy, and we need to be steadfast, united, and do everything to further our case rather than undermine it.
All right, at this time, I'll take one other question before we go today's press conference.
Sorry, I know you said that you're only speaking about certain, taking questions on your first statement, but I just wanted to hear what's the opposition's position on the sixth project when it comes to ring-fencing?
Again, we have dealt with that many times. Thursday's press conference will create, there will be a opportunity to deal with that, and we will deal with it.
I'll take.
I have a final question. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. But it's ironic that Mr. Ramjatan's position on treason is quite different as it applies to Jagdeo. To majority of Guyanese, Jagdeo has committed treason in attempting to cede a portion of Guyana to Venezuela. If that isn't treasonous, well, something's definitely wrong with that interpretation. I say that keeping in mind that not so long ago, you, Mr. Ramjatan, was asked to give legal advice on a particular individual, whether that person should be charged with treason or not. Now, having said that, what is the take with Jagdeo being served with that court order? He seemed to be running all over Georgetown, dodging. Maybe he's running and hiding behind police here. What's the situation, Mr. Ramjatan, please?
I understand as of this morning, he has asked his lawyer, Mr. Satram, to accept service on his behalf. And my clerk, along with Mr. Anand Bunsaran, did go across to the office, and it was served. Officially, it has to be served by the marshal under the rules of court. But I understand that they're going to put up a defense, and that defense will then override any question as to whether they were served or not. And so the issue of service will not even be in question. So it has been resolved to that extent this morning.
Politically, what we must draw from it is, here is a man who's prepared to use the legal system to do all kinds of nonsense. And then when he finished making all his outlandish statement, seemed to believe that he should be able to hide from the very system that he abuses.
And there were 9 occasions, I understand, that there were attempts from Mr. Gulsaran and the marshal. And now we get Anand Nandalal going on his Facebook writing all kinds of nonsense. I was trying to work out with Mr. Nandalal that please could the president, the vice president, be at Freedom House at 10 o'clock so the marshal will meet him. Because when you're at his home, he's telling his security guard, tell them that they're sleeping. And I can't be served while I say I'm sleeping. But he could be telling his security guard that he is sleeping. That's the kind of fellow we got in Jagdeo.
Thank you. All right, I wanted that on.
Sorry, oh my gosh, just a little thing.
Go ahead quickly, Mr. Harris. Go ahead.
Yes. Now, I am speaking on behalf of my colleague Mark Benchka, and the question of treason. If treason is about overthrowing the government, then Mark Benchka could not have been charged for walking outside the office of the president, regardless of how many people he had. That wasn't overthrowing the government, but he was charged. Are you of the view that anyone who threatens the decision of the state, to the extent that it involves another state and supporting another state against your state, is committing treason, sir?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. It is always depending on the circumstances, and it is my opinion, if it's that what you want, that I don't think we can have any charges of treason against Mr. Jagdeo here. It's a complicated matter. Oh yes, you can say that previous people who have been charged then were unjustly charged. You can state a case in that regard. But let us keep it there at this hour, Adam Harris. It is my opinion, and I've shared it already with you guys here. It was probably a statement of what he intends, a rather stupid statement to make. I would charge him with stupidity rather than treason. And I think the whole country will convict him for stupidity.
Thank you. I want to thank all the members of the media who joined the press conference today, and of course our viewing audience and all the social media platforms. Thank you for joining today's press conference, and do have a wonderful afternoon.